Welcome to the Creative Tools Podcast. My name is Ashay, and I'm immensely passionate about using technology for creativity. On this podcast, I talk to various creators about what tools and technology they use to be creative. My guest today is Hannah Wilson. Hannah is an artist and a designer based in the leafy green English countryside. In January 2022, Hannah took up a new hobby, visualizing ideas. The goal was to condense complex ideas from the books she was reading into simple and easy to recall visuals. Inspired by a growing community of like minded creatives, Hannah now shares her illustrations to a combined audience of 100,000 people online and has just left her job to pursue the project. Hey, Hannah, thanks a lot for visiting my podcast. My first question is, what do you create?
What do I create? So I've been sharing these very small and nuanced little visuals on Instagram. The best way to describe them is they are condensing a complex piece of information into something that's super simple. And maybe I draw a flower and then I point towards a few pieces of information on that. And that's what I share.
And what are these visuals about exactly?
So they're about, I'd say, personal development, lots of different themes really, but most of it is around mind management and how we can improve our day-to-day life. So for me, in general, I'm just trying to figure out how to navigate this crazy landscape that we have right now. And I create these visuals after reading books or listening to podcasts. And the goal is just so that I can live a better life. And by sharing them on the internet, other people can also have the same impact.
Great. Have your creations been always digital, or you also create something that's tangible?
Yeah, so my background is actually in fine art. So I come back from doing, I've done painting, drawing, all kinds of different things, photography. And ever since I was little, I've been doing something creative, something arty. And I did my degree in fine art and then transitioned to graphic design. And then here I am transitioning to illustration and taking it on full time.
Oh, okay. So currently, all of your creations are digital, which like digital images or illustrations that you create that you release on Instagram, correct?
Yeah, currently.
Okay.
I mean, I do have aspirations to dip back into the fine art because it's a passion of mine, but you can't do everything at once. And I think there's a lot to be said for just going all in on one project.
Okay. So I want to focus this discussion around three aspects of creation. So first is pre-creation. So before you start creating, what happens, then the creation part, and then the post-creation. So after you have created, what happens. So let's talk about the pre-creation aspect of your creations. So specifically, what I want to understand is, how do you receive inspiration for what you create? How do you record that inspiration? And how do you retrieve it when you want to create from that inspiration?
Okay, so how do I receive my information? Well, it's either from just something that I've picked up in my day-to-day life. So something really simple and sometimes it's a topic that I've been thinking about for years and I finally managed to put it out in something in a creative way. Other than that, it would be a podcast. So I actively listen to particular podcasts and then take notes. So receiving that information, either through podcast, books, or my own personal experiences. And then how do I take notes? Well, it has to be pen and paper. I don't think anything can really beat that because you have so many distractions on any other piece of technology. And the goal is to just focus on the idea at first. And then moving on, I switch to my iPad and I take notes, and I now have a whole Notion database of ideas, which I'm starting to collect. So there's no shortage of ideas. It's just then finding the time to turn that into a visual, as I would call it. And then, yeah, that comes into Adobe Illustrator. But yeah.
So you mentioned Notion. Is that a tool that you use, a digital tool that you use on your iPad?
Yeah. Yes, it's very new to me. I've only just got an iPad as well. So previously I was using the Wacom drawing graphics tablet, but the iPad for me has proved a great way to just solidify my ideas, I'd say. It can be a problem that my ideas get lost in these notepads or random pieces of paper that I've scribbled on. And having them in Notion, I can now organize my ideas and then they're there when I need them. Otherwise, I've got this mental space taken up by trying to remember where my ideas are held and what page in the notepad. I'm sure you can relate.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to understand actually, because so before Notion, you were recording your ideas in a physical notebook. And at that time, did you have a challenge in remembering where the idea was and retrieving the idea or the inspiration?
Yeah, that's the big problem, because I can scribble on lots of different pages. Every
Yeah.
night when I go to bed, I'm just sort of scribbling out and just seeing what I can get out of my brain. It is a big project and I'm really passionate about it. So I don't stop, my brain's continuously going. So over time, that builds up to quite a lot, as you can imagine. Like the notepads are just stacking up.
Yeah.
So I've started with Notion, and I'm just crossing out. If I've transferred it to Notion, I cross it out in a notepad, so I know that page is recorded and I've got that idea down.
Do you directly go into Notion at all, or you always go into a notebook first and then go to Notion?
No, it would definitely be my notebook first, because I might play around on Apple Notes, but other than that, I'm starting out on a pencil with a pen and paper. And there's also a big problem that I have, is that I've got so much screen time. I'm racking up a lot of screen time. And so if the initial stages of my creative process can be on paper, I can look after my eyes a bit. If everything relies on technology, then I'm really, one, leaving myself vulnerable to get distracted, because there's all sorts of apps on my iPad and my phone, on my computer. But two, I'm just racking up the hours spent looking at blue light, and especially if it's like right as I'm going to bed, it's better for me to take a notebook to bed than to take an iPad to bed, for example. But yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. And has it ever happened to you at all that you wrote something in your notebook or in Notion or notebook, whatever it is, and you did not necessarily use that idea to create something at that time, but the moment of idea hitting you and the moment of actual creation were separated by like months or years? What was that happen?
Yeah, it happens a lot, because I think when I come up with an idea, I just, I want to get it written down, and then I want to get it up on my Notion database so it's there. But they're not always fully formed ideas. And for my output, this is a visual. There's a particular sort of structure that I'm looking for. And sometimes it just isn't concise enough, or the message isn't clear enough. Or I just have a gut feeling that I just say, no, it's not ready. So I just leave it sitting there until I want to address it. Or sometimes, you'll know the feeling over time. You just resolve things in your mind. You just have it, in a back folder somewhere, and it just all of a sudden one day you say, I know the solution. So definitely I sit on ideas all the time.
But then for your creations, do you have like a schedule? Like, how do you make sure you go back to the ideas that you have recorded?
I start with them. So when I want to create a visual, I go straight to my Notion database or my notebook. But I'm now trying to make sure that the Notion part is in there. But yeah, otherwise, I don't just make it up. I don't just come to Illustrator and then make it up on the spot, because the idea has to come from somewhere, and it has to be rooted in some idea. maybe
I
if
think the
it would be different if it was just
yeah,
a
I think the
drawing.
incubation part of the idea needs to be there before you actually create. That's what.
Yeah, I like that word.
Yeah. Um, and then do you? So what is it about Notion that you like? I haven't used Notion, by the way, so I'm just curious
Okay.
to understand what is it about Notion that you like?
For now, it's the ability to write lists and have ideas connected and collected in certain ways and organized. I'm probably not using it to its full capacity right now because, yeah, I am new to it. But previously, I would write lots and lots of lists. I have, you can't see it, but I have a massive, great big pin board in front of my desk, and I would pin up all these lists. But I think it just gets, your space gets quite cluttered. So what Notion gives me is this this way to organize all these different things that are running through my mind. Because if they just stay in your mind, then you're just not going to be able to focus on other things because you're thinking about all the things that are in your head.
Have you used anything other than Notion, and you just like
Yeah.
Notion better than that app?
I suppose I haven't really tried any other apps other than, it's just, I've heard lots of people raving about Notion, so I've just jumped on the wagon, if you like. I would definitely try other things. I'd be open to trying different apps. But for me right now, especially, the ability to have a database and then have that visual, so I can create a gallery view. So you have the pictures popping up you might be familiar with. I need to be able to see my ideas visually because the titles don't really mean anything to me. I have to give it a title, but yeah.
So in Notion, you can also store sketches.
You can't draw with the iPad, the Apple Pencil, but I can take a screenshot from my Apple notes, and then I can store pictures, and they're small enough to work on the free plan.
But then you just mentioned that you transfer your ideas from Notebook to Notion. So in Notebook, you must be sketching visuals. Am I correct? Or it is just text?
The Notebook is always a sketch because I'm working in a visual, because I do visuals. I do a sketch and then I transfer the sketch to Apple Notes and then transfer that to Notion.
Oh, so you take a picture of your sketch, add it to Notes, and then, or you create another sketch in Notes with Apple Pencil.
I redraw it.
Oh, redraw it.
Yeah,
okay.
Because you can imagine when you're just scribbling in a notebook, there's all sorts of kind of ideas, and then you can condense it into one. I play around with different options. You just abstract from one idea, and your creative brain just goes wild, right?
Oh, so you are first sketching with like a physical pencil or pen in your physical notebook first. Then the next version of the sketch is in the Notes app on your iPad, and then that version basically gets stored in Notion as a screenshot. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It's quite a lengthy process. I can appreciate that, but I don't have to do the sketching beforehand. If I'm on the iPad and it's not late at night, I can just, do you know what I mean? I can just put the sketch straight from Apple Notes into Notion.
And Notion, I think what you just mentioned is you can see like a gallery view of all your notes.
Yeah.
Okay. I can see how that would be helpful, because then you can see the entire idea spectrum
exactly
in front of you. Okay.
And then you can organize them by, I'm trying to remember what I've got in my Notion board now, but you've got building, so the ideas that I'm building, and then I've got another category which is built, so maybe I've already created the visual, and then another category which is shipped, so maybe I've shared the visual. So that's quite helpful, because when I'm coming onto my computer and I'm ready to make a visual, I just want to be able to look at the ideas that are new, that not the ones I've made already. That makes sense. So I can whittle them down.
And then when you actually start creating, you browse through your unpublished ideas. Is that correct? And then choose one that is probably most suited for that particular moment.
Yeah, whatever I feel like it.
Okay.
Yeah, basically.
Okay. Great. All right. Thanks a lot. This is very helpful. I hadn't heard of Notion before, so I will definitely give it a try. So let's talk about the creation aspect of it. And I will tell you my experience of creating, and you tell me if that is something that you experience as well, or if you have a different process. I would love to hear that. So I feel that in creation part, there are usually two main steps. One is building a prototype, and then the second step is shaping a prototype. So building a prototype, you make a lot of decisions on like what you want. Like for example, I make films, so I build a prototype in the form of a storyboard for my film. While I'm building a prototype, what usually happens is the film is actually getting formed in my head well
Right.
before well before it is being shot. And then it gets shot, and then I have this huge mountain of raw material of video and audio in front of me. And then the process is to uncover the film that I am already seeing in my head from the material that I have in front of me. So do you also go through a similar process, or you have something different?
So you're what you're describing to me is you're visualizing something quite accurately in your head before
Yeah.
you're, yeah, because I might be out on a walk and then I visualize thing as something in a certain way. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm then just drawing exactly what's in my head. Yeah.
So what tools and technology do you use for creating your creations?
So I suppose I've touched upon it a little bit already, but I do use Adobe Illustrator because I already have a subscription with my background being in graphic design. I already have those tools available for me. But I wouldn't say that it's necessary to have Illustrator to create these visuals. It's highly possible to create them in Procreate, or you've got, I think, Affinity Designer. There are a few other packages out there. So I don't necessarily want to say that Illustrator is the only way forward for creating a visual. But I'm quite comfortable using that package, and yeah, it's just really fun.
So, and do you use Illustrator on your iPad, or you mentioned something about Wacom tablet before? So do you still use Wacom, or now you directly draw on your iPad? How do you draw your
So
illustrations?
you've caught me at a time where I'm at a bit of a crossroad with my process, because I've only just a good few months down the line invested in an iPad, but I've got quite a solid process in Illustrator where I use my Wacom tablet. I just went for the basic tablet. It was just off Amazon. It was really cheap, and that's what got me going back in January, almost a year ago now, and that's kept me going. And I still use that for now. So the Wacom One graphics tablet with Illustrator, because that is enough. Because you can also use the pen tool with the mouse, but you just sometimes need the Wacom just to get those hand drawn lines. But moving forwards, there's more opportunity for me to explore different programs and seeing how I can make the Apple Pencil work for illustration on the iPad. But as you can imagine, that's a lot. I just want to focus on creating content and getting it out there rather than getting too distracted by learning my way around a new package, because there's a lot going on right now.
And when you create your illustration in Illustrator, do you, and you also mentioned that you have Notion gallery view, and then you choose an idea. Do you somehow export that idea from Notion and bring it into Illustrator and then sketch on top, or you have it like on the side somewhere in another window, and then you start with a completely blank canvas in Illustrator?
Well, it depends what I'm feeling, really, because I've got the iPad, so I could have it open on my iPad in front of my computer, or I have a second screen open, but it's really just a doodle. So it's nothing like a precise drawing that I want the shape of. It's more, hey, this is it. And then I just, create a plant pot. It's just, I just go ahead and draw that in Illustrator.
And I mean, one of the things that I feel that digital technology has given creators is an ability to make a choice rather than a decision. So if you are a painter, earlier when art was analog, if you had to draw something on a canvas, if you put a stroke of paint on the canvas, then if you wanted to try a different version of it, you had to use another canvas. So the art was like inherently destructive at that time. But with digital technology, what has happened is when you put a digital stroke on a digital canvas, you can make a copy of it, change its form, change its color, and now you have a choice between the two that you can choose, which is a great, I think, an ability that creators have received because of technology, because of digital technology. And I see that in filmmaking as well. Like when I make films, if I was editing a film on like a celluloid film, if I make a cut, then that cut is made. If I want to try a different version, then I have to use a different film roll. But in digital films, it's not true. I can make a cut, I can join the clips together, I can try a different version of a scene. So do you allow yourself, do you create opportunities for yourself to make a choice for your creations? Like for one single illustration, do you make like different versions of that illustration and then make a choice of which one works best?
Yeah, I suppose what you're describing is iteration. So as you're evolving an idea, I'll draw something and then I'll just put it to one side and then draw something slightly differently or try a different layout, because the nature of creativity is just being experimental with these shapes and different things in front of us. And often it's in that process of playing around and just, hey, what about this version? That's when I come up with different answers. It's by doing that, it allows for more creativity. But I also think it's a bit of a curse, because there's kind of like no stopping which versions do you keep.
Yeah.
And then when is it finished? Oh, could I just make that line a bit, less wobbly? Or, I could try and perfect it and then spend hours on something and not really create any more value. So yeah, it's just finding that balance, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm still working on that.
Yeah,
I'm definitely not perfect.
I heard this quote somewhere that art is never finished; it is abandoned in the
Yeah,
in the interest of time. Um,
that's very
so,
true. Yeah.
and another question I have is about templates. So, do you for your illustrations, do you create templates that you can kind of reuse for your next creations?
I suppose I don't have any templates as such, because I don't want my work to feel too repetitive. I want to feel fresh and new each time. But there are some analogies that's an analogy that you can use to portray a different idea. Like, for example, the water ripple. You can say lots of things. I've got one that points towards one drop and making the water a big impact with water rippling out. But yeah, I'm very cautious not to rely on those templates too much. It's great. I can put out a visual based on a template if I'm busy and I'm just trying to meet my demands I've set myself. That can be great, but I try not to rely on that. And then I suppose another aspect of that is in my Illustrator file, I have all my other visuals around the one that I'm working on, so I can bring ideas and pull different icons or shapes from other visuals. So I never create something that's entirely new. There's always a line or a shape pulled together from another visual.
So this is another thing that you mentioned is very interesting. And again, I haven't used Illustrator much.
Okay.
So I just want to understand this. Like in Illustrator, when you're illustrating this, illustrating one illustration, you can also have your other old illustrations around you in the same view.
So it's purely personal preference, but depending on how large in pixels your artboard is, you can have lots of artboards in one file. It's that I wouldn't recommend having too many, because then your file runs slow. But say you have 20 and then you cap that and then you start a new file after 20 illustrations. And so it depends how you want to organize it, but there are different layers in Illustrator, and then I tend to have a different layer for each artboard, and it works out quite well. But you can literally have everything around you, because imagine that I'm working on maybe 10 ideas at once, but I'm not necessarily happy with all 10. So it takes me a bit of time to figure out when it's ready, if that makes sense. They're all brewing.
So you don't necessarily have like one project per illustration. You have like one project, and in that project you have several illustrations.
Yeah,
Okay.
more than several. Yeah, loads. Because they're really small, what I'm doing. Do you know what I mean? They're just arrows, lines. So yeah.
Okay, great. Now let's talk about the post creation aspect of it. So what I want to understand is how do you release, how do you distribute, and how do you market your illustrations? And when I say release, what I want to understand is how do you release the illustration from yourself? Like how do you know that you are not going to make any change to that illustration after that point? How do you decide that?
Well, I guess there are a few things that come to mind there, and that is that when I share them on Instagram, so I share on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, all scheduled at the same time. When if I'm not fully happy with something, I won't share it. I'll back out and I'll trust my gut, because usually it's right. That if I've got a suspicion that it's not a visual, just doesn't, the message isn't there, or it's not clear enough, I'm not going to share it, because I try and share fewer visuals that I believe are more quality, offering value, than try and share lots of visuals where I might have to lower my standards a bit. Standard is subjective, so I'm cautious to use that word, and I don't want to say that I don't necessarily believe that what I'm putting out is 100% great quality as well. I'm not saying that either, but how do I decide if it's not enough? Is that what you're asking me? If the message isn't refined, and if I'm not adding value to other people's lives, if I think it's not finished, like sometimes I know that it's a good idea, but the visual hasn't done the idea justice. So it pays to just wait and see what my brain will come up with a solution. It might take 2 more weeks, but I might have a better outcome in 2 weeks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. There are two aspects of it. Like these days, because you can experiment a lot with social media, I have seen people starting with I won't say scrappy, but like starting with like really like an experimental stuff, and then refining their creation as they go. And I have also seen people where they won't share until they feel that it is something that should be shared from their side. So that's why I asked this question. Like, what is your process? Like, do you try to reach to a point where you feel that it needs to be shared, or do you share, see the response, and then refine your message for the next creation?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture, because I can always reshare a different version. But if I look back, I haven't really done that much. So that's actually quite interesting. But I would comment on that if someone's starting out and they want to create something visual, something similar to what I'm doing, I wouldn't place the emphasis on providing quality, because you can then get stuck in your own head trying to think, is it good enough, and not end up sharing. The goal is just to get something out, and I think the phrase is put in the reps, and then once you will get better over time. The quality, just by putting the quantity, leads to quality.
Yeah, I mean, I have a certain idea about releasing creations. Is creators don't necessarily release because they need validation from someone for their creation. They release because they have to move on to the next creation so that they can learn something new. So that's my idea of release. Like I release not because I'm looking for any response from anyone. I release because it kind of, I look at it as a learning opportunity. So if I can't learn anything new from the creation that I'm doing right now, I release and then move on to the next one so that I can learn something new. So I'm keeping me continuously in this learning wagon.
I
For
suppose what you're
myself.
saying is keeping the momentum going. Is that right?
But keeping a learning momentum going
Yeah. Okay.
for creations. That's what I'm saying.
No, I think that's a good point. It's keeping that habit in place, and sometimes I release something when I'm not happy, but it's more the pressure of, hey, I've just got to get it out, otherwise there will be no visual for this week. Do you know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah. That's another thing that actually, let's talk about the distribution part, and then I will come back to that thought. So how do you distribute your creations? Like, how do you use any tools and technology to publish to different platforms?
So right now I'm using Buffer. I haven't really explored other options. At this point, it just comes to what I decided to use. And this allows me to schedule my work to come out, usually at a time when I'm not on my phone yet. So that would be in the morning. I choose to send it out in the morning. But I tried without scheduling, and I found that what that did was just take over my life a bit. I was too busy reliant on, doing the manual work of putting out the Instagram or what have you.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're able to schedule, you can schedule an idea and then you can start thinking about the next one.
Correct.
And then the next one. And then you've got 1 week's content scheduled, and then the weight isn't there, but you can easily get bogged down by it all.
Yeah. And how many ideas do you schedule at a time?
Well, I'm only using the free plan. So you can only schedule up to 10. But if I'm honest, right now, because my energy has been in other projects, I don't have any scheduled. So for me, I'm pretty much putting out what I'm creating that week. Yeah.
And one of the things that I see challenging, I have used Buffer as well before. One of the things I see challenging with that aspect is, first of all, you have to decide the date and time and the text of the post and the hashtags and everything for every single post. And every single post, you have to do it one by one, repetitively. And there is no way, I mean, at least I didn't find it when I used Buffer a few years ago. There is no way to know what I have published in like one single view. Like I still have to maintain the catalog of my published creation somewhere else. And then Buffer is something that I'm using only for publishing. So do you keep a catalog of your creations somewhere, or is it just in Buffer right now?
Are you talking about in terms of a catalog, a folder of all my visuals to date, or are you?
Yeah, like what visuals that you have published, what are unpublished, and is it somewhere in one single spreadsheet or something like that?
Well, the ones that are unpublished aren't there because they're not there. Do you know what I mean?
No, but I know, but I don't mean not created. I mean created illustrations but not published.
Yeah, well, for me, because of my capacity, I simply can't create too many. I really focus on each idea. So anything that's in that folder of my visuals, they will have been created and also published or scheduled to be published.
Okay.
Pretty much as soon as it's ready, I'm then going to put that in Buffer. Maybe if I was creating a different type of content, then I'd have that structure that you mentioned, because that makes a lot of sense to be able to organize your content by published, unpublished, but created, but not published. Yeah.
I mean, one of the reasons why I asked this question is sometimes what has happened is my own creations have been my inspiration for my next creation. So I need to be able to see what I have published in like one single view. And so I mean, I do a series called Thought Shots, which is not visuals, but basically my thoughts in a text format on Instagram. And I have like a spreadsheet where I'm putting all those thoughts, like one single row is one row is each one thought. And so that's why if I'm like adding something new to the queue, I can just look up to the thoughts that I have already published, and then kind of I can also use that as an inspiration to create another thought. So
Yeah.
so that's why I was asking, like, how do you maintain a catalog of your published and unpublished creations? So unpublished probably is I mean, you may not have much in that category, but for the
Yeah.
published ones, do you maintain them in a folder, or do you maintain in a spreadsheet? Like, how do you do that?
So they're maintained in a folder right now, but I know that there's scope to go ahead and create a gallery in Notion for all of my visuals to date. There might be I might run into troubles because I'm not sure what photos I can upload in the plan that I have. But yeah, if I want to look at my work for research, obviously I look in the Illustrator file that I'm in for all the other visuals next to it. But also I just scroll on my Instagram if I want to sort of scroll. So the visual gallery is kind of what's already out there most recently. If I'm looking at Twitter, I don't quite get the same feed, but Instagram offers
Instagram,
that.
You can see all of
yeah.
And do you have like a schedule for publication? Do you try to maintain a schedule?
I try to, and my schedule is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but it changes just depending on what I'm doing. So this week I'm going to be putting out 2 visuals, not 3, but I've done other work, you know what I mean? So it's just, for me right now, I've been freelancing I'd say for 2 months. I left my full-time job, and just there's a lot to juggle in terms of learning what it is to be a freelancer. You've got to be your own accountant, and then you've got to be the designer, so creating any products that I'm making or any of the work, and then also I'm the one that's marketing it all, and just there's a lot to take on, and yeah, that's what I'm doing, juggling all these different projects.
And what is the biggest challenge you face in your entire creation process, like from the idea to publishing? What's the biggest challenge that you see?
The biggest challenge, there are many challenges. It's not smooth plain sailing. What you might see on Instagram is just I might have slaved over something, or I've really thought about it long and hard, or I've asked family members, what do you think of this? But I do that much less now because I trust my own gut more, which is good. Getting more confident. But I'd say the biggest challenge is putting out content regularly, because I don't want to live to put out content. I want to be living, and then as a result creating content which I then want to share. And so when I don't schedule ahead of time, which, as you know, currently I haven't got any, I'm then living or creating work to schedule. And that's quite, like, you don't want to stay in that place for too long, because I'm not as it's not as fun when I have to do something. Yeah. I don't have to. I really don't have to. But Correct. I've told myself that I want to. And you really want to be in that optimal state of creativity where you're just hitting the flow and you're just loving what you're doing. And it's sometimes difficult to, when you fall out of line with everything being scheduled, to maintain that. Yeah. So that's my biggest challenge.
Great. Thanks a lot, Hannah, for the discussion. It was really great talking with you.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been my first podcast, so hopefully many more.
Thanks for tuning in. If you are a creator, I would love to talk with you. Please connect with me through my website or social media. See you in the next episode.